One.
Hi, welcome to our new episode of Not Your Typical Wellness Podcast. I'm your co-host, Anna Galle, with my co-host,
Ashley, hi.
Hi, and we have two incredible herbalists and healers here with us today, husband-wife team, Peter Galle and Amy Dawson from Yin Dew Herbal Medicine.
Hi,
Hi,
guys.
everyone.
Hi.
Full disclosure, Peter is my brother and Amy is my sister-in-law. But that works in my favor because they truly are a remarkable herbalist, and I'm so lucky to be in such close contact with them. So today we wanted to talk about their process, their herbal medicine, but particularly the Indoor Blend, which they made for our company, Elemental Wellness. Isn't that right, Ashley?
Yeah, that's right. So for the last couple of years, our practice, Elemental Wellness, has been asked to treat runners at the Malibu Half Marathon. So we've been part of the recovery team. And this year we wanted to do something a little bit special for runners. We wanted to support them in another way beyond just acupuncture. And so we decided we wanted to try and come up with an herbal product that would help with recovery, with sports performance, help protect the tissues. So, of course, we called up Amy and Peter and asked them if they could help us to make this happen. So here we are.
Yeah,
it
was a pleasure to formulate it.
And actually it was far greater than our expectations. We had runners who actually got the product on a Saturday, and then the race was Sunday morning, and people came up to us after the race and told us that they were that they set personal records for their run, and they truly believe that it was the drops. It was the only thing they did differently. So, I mean, quick results, incredible results. People were stoked. We're stoked. So we should talk about it.
Yeah, but let's start off, Peter, Amy. Give us a little bit about your background, how you got into herbal medicine, and what made you decide to start Yin Dew, your company.
Okay, I'll go first. I feel like because we have two different paths to how we came to Yin Dew. And so I started herbal medicine. I was actually preparing to go to Chinese medicine school so I could study herbs because I really didn't know that there was another avenue to studying herbal medicine, like as a professional way. And so through that process of, getting the credentials to go to Chinese medicine school, I had just had my son, and it was like kind of a pivotal moment. It was like, okay, either go down this track or another track came up, and it was through Western medicine, like folk herbalism. Mm. And so I decided to take that path because after having my baby, it was just it was recovery time. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw, it was the Gaia School of Healing and it was located in Topanga, I just felt like this is really where I need to be. This is like what feels really nourishing in a way that I want to, I was interested in learning herbs because it was all like sensorial. So you're like sitting with the herbs, you're tasting the herbs, you're learning about where they grow. And that really drew me in. And so I decided to take that route. And so it was just really interesting because, Peter's obviously from like a very strong, as you two are as well, like Chinese medicine background. And it just became really evident that we were going to kind of bridge these worlds, and and then Yin Dew happened actually like right around this time, winter solstice, 2 years ago. So it's during the pandemic. And I was working a lot with Shamanic Journey because that was something that my school taught me to do. And part of our project, like our end of year project, was making and presenting medicine. But it wasn't like launching a company. It was just like really making what wanted to come through. And so that's why I was working with Shamanic Journey. And what came through were these 3 special blends. And then it just unfolded to become Yin Dew. So Yin Dew was not a like concept from my brain. It just I really worked with Shamanic Journey to see what wanted to come through me. and it became Yin Dew. It was just really untraditional. And then, of course, with Peter's, influence, he always wanted to have an apothecary for his, Chinese medicine, his acupuncture practice. And so they just really kind of segued together. And then it just kept unfolding.
Tell them about the story about datura. Datura is our symbol. Datura is a flower. It's a name for a flower that locally is called momoy in Chumash or toloake in Spanish. It's datura raiti or sacred datura. But tell them a little bit about that, because it forms our symbol and it's important, and it came up in shamanic journeying, if you feel comfortable.
Can you
Yes.
also explain a little what you mean by shamanic journeying, Amy?
Yes.
Yeah. So shamanic journey, we were taught to have this experience, and it's typically with a drum, and you go into like a dream state or like a theta state. And what happens a lot is that, like, I had to keep practicing it because I would just like conk out, and then I'd wake up and it'd just be like, I don't know what happened, So like, as you practice doing shamanic journey and kind of delving into this world, it's like you have like a foot in like the physical, like here we are now, we're talking, and then like a foot in the like ethereal realms, and then they kind of blend together. And so the idea is like I would go into these dream realms with a question, or sometimes like no question at all. I would just be like, I want to go check this out. I want to explore. I want to play, and then kind of bring it back into the here and now, like the physical, like, place that we're in.
Wow.
And so that is how, like, and I would go there with datura. So the flower that Peter's talking about was one of the first plant spirit medicine experiences that I had. Again, this was guided by my teacher at the Gaia School of Healing. Her name's Marisha. And yeah, she had us just really kind of go out of like our thinking mind and just explore from this place that was like non-analytical. And so I connected deeply with this flower, datura, immediately. It was on the farm, just kind of growing randomly. And you'll see datura growing all over Southern California.
Wait, let me ask you, Amy, just to clarify, datura is poisonous, so you didn't physically take it, correct?
No. Yeah, datura, that's such a great question, Anna, because yes, like I've never ingested datura. I've worked with datura like as flower essence, and you can do that safely. But I would definitely recommend, you need to have somebody show you, or like let you know that it is totally like you're in good place with it. But yeah, you can go up to datura and you don't need to ingest datura at all. Like most of my experiences with datura was just sitting with the plant and meditating and going into shamanic journey. So that was kind of my goal or my intent whenever I would go into shamanic journey. I was just like, I want to meet you. Like, I want to meet this flower. I want to meet this spirit and this essence behind this flower, that because I was getting I was getting messages and just physical experiences from just sitting and laying under the flower and like meditating with the flower. And so datura is on our bottles. Like you'll see like datura is everywhere, because datura is actually the guiding spirit of Yin Dew, like the underlying foundation completely. So through datura, through shamanic journey with datura, I found how to make medicine. Like I wouldn't think like, oh, I'm going to make a lung tonic. Or I'm going to make, something that, for like a specific purpose. Like when I first started making medicine, it was all through guidance. And so one of the blends that came together, which I have now on Yin Dew, is kava kava and vanilla bean glycerin. So it's vanilla bean glycerin and then kava kava extracted in alcohol blended together. And so that was, just straight through datura. Like datura showed me that these two plants go really well together because of the inherent
vulnerability.
That's a great, vulnerability. And to like, in order to have vanilla and kava kava here, they require human touch. And so like the propagation through kava kava like has to be done with a human as well, like in order to propagate. Like we're interwoven.
We have to work
And
together.
vanilla, yes, and vanilla bean is the same way. It has to be hand pollinated now. And so the two together is I put together and understood that it would be a great aid for healers and practitioners in the healing space because of this beautiful like symbiosis of plants and people together working and healing. Like it just, yeah.
We're going to pause for a minute. I'm getting an error warning that says,
Here we go.
I just want a hot dog. Now I
Okay.
want sadness and meat droppings from a floor.
Oh, wow.
That's
okay,
what.
we're back recording. We took a short break. Okay, so I want to get to Peter's origin story as well. And Amy, what you said was so beautiful. And I think is so foreign to Western minds, even myself, who, we have an herbalism component in Chinese medicine school, that it wasn't until I was sitting in ayahuasca ceremonies that someone said, oh, well, you don't need to ingest the ayahuasca for the spirit of ayahuasca to communicate with you and change you and help you and be a medicine for you. And I remember at the time that concept like blowing my mind. But then further in my discussions with you, Amy, and you sharing that same wisdom with me and me thinking like, oh my God, it opened up this whole world of like, not only what's possible, but what is really the reality with plants is that they all have spirits and sentience and helpful qualities, and you don't need to eat them to communicate with them, which I think is just a mind-blowing paradigm. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so Peter, tell us how did you get into Chinese medicine school? Tell us about you.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I originally found Chinese medicine school through herbs. Interestingly enough, I was in New York with Amy, and I got a book in the mail from my sister, and it was about herbal medicine preparations. And at that time, I was studying a lot of Weston Price Foundation, nutritional information. I was really into that for a while, and I was wanting to get into herbs. I didn't even really know what I was doing. I walked down the street in New York to a place called the Flower Shop. Flower Power, yeah. And it was an apothecary, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. I just walked in and saw all these glass jars, and I saw all these herbs, and I just was like, I'll just, kind of, I don't know what I want. And the attendant there helped me. And I got some black. I know now. I actually didn't know what it was at the time. I just, in my living memory now, thinking back, I know the herbs. But at the time, I just didn't even know. But it was black cohosh, actually, raspberry leaf, motherwort, actually. And we just drank these herbs. They were on our counter, and we just messed with them. We had no real understanding. I got the book later, and then started to see all these medical preparations. And from Anna. And then so eventually I thought that that's what I would do when I started to transition out of what I was doing up in New York. So I came to California, and I thought I would pursue a herbal medicine certificate. But when I looked at the herbal medicine certificates that I could see online at the time, there were only 3 weekends. And I felt inherently that for some reason, there was a nagging need to treat complicated and serious illness, or illness that was difficult to treat for whatever reason. And that's a deeper mystery that I'm still trying to uncover. So I was looking around for herbal schools, didn't find any. And I went to the local grocery store, and I found a Ron T. Garden book. And Ron T. Garden is a kind of a famous and infamous in our field, I would say. He's part of the generation of tonic herbalists that came out of a relationship with Chinese tonic herbalism, which is kind of a long history that I'm not going to get into, but it's definitely famous and infamous. There's 2 sides to it. So anyway, but I read his book and it talked about treating serious illness, supporting serious illness, and that it was out of a medical paradigm called Chinese medicine. And so I looked up Chinese medicine schools. I saw there was a 4-year program, and I thought, oh, this might prepare me or equip me to be able to treat illness that was complicated. So I went to school, and I actually was practicing to become an herbalist. I was tutoring in herbalism, and I was prepared to go down that route, the classical route, with a text called the Treatise on Cold Damage, or Cold Injury. But then halfway through, I started finding the original text of needle therapy, heat therapy, and herbs in the Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic. I started studying that through various means, and my modality became specifically needle and heat therapy, as described by that text, and trying to at least learn that. While I was in school, I still had those herbal ties, though, and I started working for a local apothecary on researching sourcing. And when I did that, that was not a pleasant experience. When I was researching sources, I found that the whole event of a herb coming from specifically China is fraught with difficulties, actually. There's a lot of opportunistic issues that are going on. And when the herbs finally get to the United States or Europe, often things happen where entire crates are switched. Things are said that they're organic and they're not. And I was troubled by this, and I called all the major herb companies, which I won't name. And there was a lot of negative reaction just for simple questioning, like, hey, where do you get your herbs from? Or can I see your certificate of analysis?
Wow.
Some would threaten us, like a small apothecary, just for asking the question. And then some would tell us, oh, we'll get those to you. And they never did. And what I realized was there was only one company for specifically Chinese herbs that was actually doing due diligence, and that was Spring Wind in California. And so for this local apothecary, I submitted my research, and they changed all of their stock because of that. And I developed a small interaction with the person that owns Springwind, Andrew Ellis, and talked to him about the process and his rigorous analysis of herbs. And that was kind of my foray into it, but I still lacked a physical relationship with the plants. And I didn't really know that that's what I was missing. So when Amy started to feel her call and go to this experiential school where she was in nature, ingesting plants, and she came across a book called Sacred Plant Medicine from Stephen Harrod Buhner. And in that, he talked about how plants talk to you and are part of a living framework or web of reality that you are also within. And we started tasting plants together. And then the need for proper sourcing, which I really knew that that was essential to create incredible medicine, because your source of herb is your medicinal texture that you get. So you have to have good quality herbs, and not just like a name that says good quality herbs. Truly, when you get them, they have to smell medicinal. Like they have to smell like medicine, like plants that are rich with compounds. Those two things came together, and I wanted to work with herbs with patience. I didn't have an outlet to it. Dried herbs, or what's called raw in TCM practice, are sometimes a little bit tricky to give to patients. We found out later that that's not true, and that's another conversation. But I needed a way to process medicine, make it quick, in terms of being able to get medicine out when I needed to for a patient, and get the sourcing together. And when Amy started having that experiential, experience, and she transferred that to me, then it was like, wow, these plants are living. And actually, when you taste them, you know what they do because you feel what they do in your body. And then when you apply that with the analytics, then you can come to a full practice. So that's kind of how Yin Dew was born or birthed.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing how in Chinese medicine school, at least in California, we become licensed herbalists and acupuncturists, but herbal medicine is taught to us purely academically.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
we never have to look at the plants if we don't want to,
I mean,
Stephen
we
has
get
this.
at a few pieces of dried herb in the little plastic baggie with the label, right? But that's the extent of it, and that doesn't let you go deep enough. It's not a deep learning, for sure.
So, no.
Stephen has this great quote where he says, when he goes to these conferences, when he's trying to talk about these plants, in the beginning, he tries to name the sources of why he knows the information he knows. And then eventually he just stops in the middle of the book and he says, but truly this knowledge or this way of using them comes from the plants, as it always has from the plants themselves. And when you look at indigenous relationship to plants, they say, no, the plants told me. And that's always from the clash of anthropology to indigenous use of medicines. And allopathic medical paradigm is an ugly one. And one of those ugly moments is when they're like, what do you mean? Are you serious? It told you? So there's these anecdotes that Stephen will tell about how indigenous people there's a certain plant where they would sneak up on it. And they said, if you don't sneak up on the plant, it won't give proper medicine. And they basically, when this hits, the ears of allopathic medical reductionism, they're like, what, this is ridiculous. Basically, look at these people who don't know anything about the world, this sort of patronizing quality that we see in allopathic medicine. And yet that plant, if it does sniff your secretions in the air, in the wind, it registers you as an herbivore. So what it will do is it will shift its compounds around to make the alkaloids bitter, and actually will shift its medicinal constituents, so that when you go to touch that berry, it tastes like hell. And because it knows you're coming. So what they did was they literally snuck up on it because they said the plant could smell you. Well, that's true. The plant literally is smelling, not by a nose, but by perceiving and receiving volatile organic chemicals in the air, which is one of the main sources of their communication anyway. So their perception, which is put in quote unquote simplified language, hey, sneak up on that plant if you want the sweet berries, is now turned into is patronized by a reductionist thinking. So plants and the relationship to plants are always through this complicated communication.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, and then to reconcile that too in a practical way in our modern time with, like you said, the importance of sourcing and the challenges around that, and how can we utilize the powers of plants and this medicine in this way that allows them to be their best selves, while also, like, how many of us in our daily lives have time to go out and do these things and communicate in these ways? And so how do we merge these two challenges, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I will say that if you think about it like that, like, oh my gosh, like this is like another thing I have to learn, like this takes a long time. But really, like, you can start by, like, as an herbalist, just make sure you know your plants, but you just put them in your body every day, a little bit. Like, infusions are great. We work a lot with tinctures now because of, just ease. And we do know the plants that we tincture. But you can start by doing overnight infusions and just sipping the plant. Do simples, like one plant at a time. And then you can see like how it feels, what's happening. You can do, short meditations. You can do like a walking meditation where you go out in nature, like I think of burdock because that was one of the first plants that I, started working with. And I mean, that first month completely changed my life. Like, it was insane. It was nuts. Like, just sipping this simple root, this weed. And I know it's commonly used in Chinese medicine too. I think they call it gobo.
Yeah, that's the
But yeah, that's a way that you can start out, and it's just like hanging out in the background, like throughout your whole day. And then you just start to notice shifts and changes.
And I think it's about, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
I think it's also about, value systems and helping bring this to the Western world. I mean, although Western, plants have been in the West for a very long time, but I feel like Western allopathic minds, right? This reductionist mind that you talk about, like, we have to somehow convince people that plants are important in this way, and that it is valuable to get to know them, to start using them, to integrate them into our lives, right? And I mean, and we saw that with this Endure blend. Like, let's talk a little bit about your process that you've described so far, and then how you came up with this incredible blend. I mean, did you how did you come up with it? Like, what was your,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
kind of, you know what I
So,
mean? Did they just come to you? Did they speak to you, or did you go more of a science route, or you know what I mean? So tell us about your
so yeah,
process.
it's the interweaving. It's the interweaving, exactly. And I've mentioned Stephen's name many times, and it will probably just continue because he really is a trailblazer in this field. One of the things he says and he talks about is the perception of the heart and how the heart is the locus of true perception and feeling, and that you utilize that center of the heart and you use the information that's sensorially coming in, and then you process it through the different areas of your body, and the brain being one of them. So the brain is a storehouse of knowledge, but how we develop and make meaning comes, and our relational meaning comes from the heart. So it's a repository. So the process that we go through is much like composing a poem or making paints. It's a sensorial process where there's an ask or a call in the human community or family, whether it's a patient or in this case, it's a blend. So we need something to help people that are stressing their bodies, that are going through a rigorous exercise. So there's a known data bank, an observation that occurs that we have for herbs. There's a lot of research that's done in mostly other countries, because in other countries they don't have the herb hysteria or hang up we seem to do in the United States. Um, they just know that herbs are helpful, that they work in different ways. They're helpful for some things and are not for other things. There's a realism about medicine. Um, and so you have this huge body of observations, and then you merge that with your own personal experiences and other forms of knowledge. So traditional knowledge is one of those, indigenous knowledge. There is many tracks and forms of herbalism inside the United States. And Stephen will talk about this in terms of the unique landscape actually the United States has because of indigenous, because of Appalachian medicine, because of European medicine. There's a huge a melting pot, to use a phrase about the United States, of herbalism here. So there are multiple ways of knowing. And so what you do is you have this ask, and then you put it in that bank of personal knowledge, world knowledge, observational knowledge, and then you come to a decision about something. So this was no different for that blend. And so the main asks are, someone is stressing their body, typically when they go over about 3 to 5 miles. The body starts to do all these different processes. It starts sweating profusely no matter what the climate is outside. It starts burning lots of calories. The immune system starts responding. And if there's any negative injuries, like predisposed injuries, those are going to take a hit. So you have those problems. And what are the main systems that are being taxed in a long run specifically? It's the kidneys, the heart, and the lungs. So you're going to want to find herbs that specifically improve those processes. And so we have not only the observational data of that, we also have the lived experience of it. So you just merge those two together. So for this one, to protect the kidneys and to help the energy of the body, we went to cordyceps and schisandra. And those two have been shown to, in observational studies, to preserve the cells of the kidneys, to improve the mitochondria of the kidneys, the heart, the lungs, the liver, to also improve the creation of immunity that is generated from the bone marrow that actually goes to your joint capsule. So every part of your body has its own specific way of dealing with pathogens and breakdown. And the joint is no different. So it has its own environment in that tissue. And so those are specifically protect that. So what happens is we get a feeling for a blend, and then it's like, okay, we have this feeling. I feel like these herbs want to work together. We sit down. We were talking. She goes, we need schisandra. And then I was thinking, Stephen talks about angustifolia for inhibiting hyaluronidase, which is a type of enzyme that breaks down hyaluronic acid. We should add that because it's going to help joints. And then it's like, okay, and then we're feeling the blend at the same time. So we know the taste of the medicines.
Yeah, we're tasting, we're kind of, we have all of our plants in simples. And so what we do is we drop, a little bit, taste it, kind of see what's going on, see if they dance well together. Because sometimes if it's not just bitter. Like bitter is not, doesn't taste bad, but like, when something is like really fluid together, and when something's kind of like, oh, like it needs a little, it's almost like cooking, honestly. It's like whenever you're combining flavors and herbs and foods, it's like there's a balance that happens. And so we look for that in the taste as well.
It's like music too. You're using your sensorium to feel dissonance or consonance, and you can feel that across mediums. And people will talk about synesthesia, like a rarity, but that's not true. The senses can always blend and mix and move, and so it's no different with herbs. So it's okay. We have this ask. Now we have our knowledge that is one type of knowledge, and we have our knowledge of our lived knowledge, and then we have our knowledge of our traditional knowledge, and then we put all that together. And so then, we keep moving. Okay, there needs to be more in here because there's more systems that are stressed. So ashwagandha is a great joint protector too. And it also improves the shape of the red blood cell profile. So it's going to help improve oxygenation. And right there, then you're thinking rhodiola, because rhodiola at the site of the lung tissue actually improves oxygen uptake and has also shown if you are working out. If you're sedentary, rhodiola doesn't do this. But if you're working out, it will improve your exercise intolerance, meaning it will improve your ability to exercise. So now we have rhodiola.
Immediately? Sorry to interrupt you, but this is immediate. This is an immediate response.
Yes, so blood compounds in plants are very complicated. They have different levels of how much that you need for them to be active, and they're various. But rhodiola is pretty immediate. So it's well known that rhodiola helps you when you go to high altitude because it helps the utilization of oxygen. And so, those are pretty immediate. There are others that take longer to build up. And also they're ones that have an immediate effect, but the effect of them. So for instance, improving your immunity in your joint capsule, that happens immediately. But for your joint capsule to then change over time, if you have pre-existing damage, that would take time because you need that immunity in place for then the joint to change as you move through time. And that's dependent on how much damage is there. So, and then just finally to wrap that up, speaking of damage, that's the issue with long distance running is if you don't have any damaged joints, you're walking out there fresh as a newborn, basically. You're okay. You actually won't start these degradation processes no matter how long you run. But many of us have nagging injuries. So what happens is you're running and you have a joint that's already not working well. It's already having some type of inflammatory response. And then when that inflammatory response, the compression begins. And then that fluid is already inflamed. And then you're adding compression. And then you're adding connective tissue that actually, and lymphatics that don't pull it well because it's inflamed and swollen. And now you get joint degradation. So what the angustifolia does in that moment is stops that response where you're starting to break down hyaluronic acid, because this is a longer discussion, but hyaluronic acid, its breakdown actually results in healing. But the problem in a joint is that it creates scar tissue. So what you want to do is you don't want that to happen when you're running. So that part is the angustifolia part. And so basically the process of developing a blend, like, we're saying, is it's this complex artistic process where you're trying to fit all these things together. And then just the last one, Eulethro, it's an amazing stress reducer and increase the body's ability to deal with stress. So what happens is, again, if your system is relaxed like that during a stressful event, you also make better decisions, and also your body moves literally better. Like a good example is like you're rushing late to work and you try to get out of your car and you try to grab your coffee cup and you just spill it everywhere, or you trip over something, you run into the door. That's because your stress response is so high that you've lost proprioreception. You literally don't know where you are anymore. You don't know your body in space. So
you just solved you just answered so many questions for me, Peter. That's incredible. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So basically with this,
I didn't know that, but I had a teacher a long time ago where she was like, "Oh, how you doing?" And I was like, "I keep falling. Like I keep running into things and falling." And she goes, "That means," she's like, "that means something's going on in your life. You need to check out and you need to like do some self-care." So I had somebody tell me like that idea in like folk wisdom a long time ago, but I didn't know the science behind it.
It's
Yeah,
so
you're
makes sense, of course.
yeah, it's your that direct relationship to your environment. And again, this speaks to a longer story, which is much more, it's very beautiful and interesting that we live on a planet with other beings that develop compounds that directly help our experience. And that gets into the more deeper mystery of the planet and why you can talk to plants. And that's not so quote unquote deemed crazy, because these plants can literally help you be more aware in your life. And people have been using plants before people were considered people. Animals eat plants. So there's this gift giving that occurs that is inherent in the system of nature that, at least from my perception in our community, in our current world, at least in the, our where our country is it, we don't recognize that network. But anyway, that's the
no, it's so true, and I find myself really trapped by the Western mind, Western capitalism, allopathic mindset myself, even as a Chinese medicine practitioner and technically a licensed herbalist, although it's hard to call myself an herbalist when I talk to you guys. But
there are levels to all levels of practice.
Yeah, exactly. But the one sort of like thought exercise that really breaks me out of that mindset is the thought exercise of, where do you think this Sudafed is coming from? Where do you think your Tylenol comes from?
Right.
Where do you think the plastic container you hold comes from? Where do you think your car comes from? It all comes from Earth, and it all comes from plants. All medicine is derived from plants or fungi, I guess you could say.
Humans, animals.
Animals, horse urine. Horse urine's in a lot of pharmaceuticals, and that basically the pharmaceutical process is making it synthetic, breaking it down, stripping it of its complexity to form it into something new. And so, like, in a way, when you're taking pharmaceuticals, you're still taking plants. Now, caveats are that it's generally not as good as for you, has side effects, it's been chemically treated, all this sorts of stuff. But like, I think when people are really just Western medicine minded, I'm just going to trust the science, quote unquote, or I'm just going to do what my Western doctor tells me to do, quote unquote. I'm like, it's still coming from the same source,
Yeah, just a different
so
method.
that's always a powerful way for me to kind of check myself when I find myself in that same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one that we had to really unravel from too. I mean, I feel like had that perfect, junction of like my life of having a baby and just feeling like I cannot go sit in a classroom right now. Like, I just don't have it in me. I just knew it. I was like, and I'm like a little bit stubborn and like, I'm like, well, I'm going to go for it. Like, I didn't have it in me. I was like, I'm not going to go for it. I'm not going to push myself. Like, I'm going to go lay under this tree because that feels really nice, And it was just such a long process. Like, I remember thinking like whenever I would get these beautiful messages that I know weren't coming from me because I had never seen or said or thought of anything like that. Like, some of these messages that were coming through at the beginning, and just through the support of having the community of other people who were going through that process of like, whoa, like, so you're talking to plants too? Like, well, what'd you dream about? Or, and just sharing and supporting each other. We just like kind of like over time, and I still, like sometimes have it too, like where, especially working with people that come with those concerns, like about plants, being like deeply like afraid of plants, like they're gonna kill me, like some people I've experienced that, and it's just an interesting place to be. I feel like it's something that I can relate to as well. Like I remember being afraid of herbs too at one point in my life because of all these messages. Like even if I didn't hear it directly, like images, it's just been building for a long time, that paradigm. And so
These
it
statements have
does,
not been approved by the FDA.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and like
Right.
just stuff like that. I mean, that's caused complications for us too. It's just like, well, like how do we speak to that language too? Like how do
Mhm.
we, you know, like not confront, but know, like just know where the something else is in the room that is not true,
Yeah.
but also like managing that fear. And like you just feel it in yourself too, like you're saying, like when it comes through and you're, yeah, like feeling like you're in this middle ground of like science
Yeah,
and
you're kind of trapped in the
feeling
middle.
the
Exactly.
perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Now
and
there's
I
one
think
other. Oh, go ahead, Peter. Go.
well, I just think that I think the big thing is that that we started to move through is understanding that um, science and observation are not equivalent to a medical paradigm or a treatment modality. And that is the big thing I think that really freed us, because we realized that observations are free in the sense that they are part of the human way of perceiving reality, their oldest time. And observations that use different means, for instance, use an instrument to observe something like a microscope, are still part of the same lineage of looking at something and trying to be aware of it in general, and then developing methods of data to quantify, or in the last 50 years, qualification of data, or the quality, or the sense of it. Um, and so these different forms of observation, they're free. They're free to anyone. What you do with that observation is what defines your paradigm. And I think the biggest issue is that reductionism, mathematical models on the complexity of living systems, uh, which is what the idea of allopathic medicine bases its ideas in, or the idea of evidence-based medicine requires reductionism to be viable, because you have to reduce the thing to its constituents, because what you're trying to get to is a clear slate of observation. They're trying to remove all variables.
Right.
And the problem with that is living systems, you cannot remove all variables. You cannot. They are too complex. So plants actually fit very well, but it requires another way of understanding them that fully embraces these special abilities that humans do have and have been exhibiting for millions of years. So, like, one of them is the best way to tell if a fruit is good, or a crop is good, or an herb is good, is one way and one way only: a human mouth, a human nose, human fingers. Hey, and you just farmers know, oh no, this something went happened this year. I didn't something happened to this soil and it's not right. I didn't add this or whatever it is. This is not a good year. It was too hot. It was too dry. It was this incredible. When you look at indigenous lexicon of plants, of their book, they can name every single plant. That knowledge is a lot mostly been lost because of assimilation, but they could name every single plant
Yeah.
in their living space. That level of knowledge is prodigious. It's beyond encyclopedic. But there's this feeling, like humans, reductionism, the problem with it is it inherently diminishes personal experience, inherently, because you have to be objective, not subjective, even though that's a falsehood. So what happens is you have a personal experience of something, but then you don't have the language in the reductionist mind to actually deal with it. That's just, yeah, like that's just you thinking some stuff, and that's the mind that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So the problem is how do you deal with that in a medicine that is completely resistant to reductionism, meaning you have to test the whole plant compound. Well, which plant is it? This plant, so urethrocytes B or A or C, or well, this part has more B, and then we don't. That doesn't work with plants. You can do it. It gives you a color of knowledge, but it's not the only knowledge. And so, yeah, it's just when you look at pharmaceuticals and what they have to do to them to change their components, and then you look at the results of that, the amount of pollution, a lot of body damage, what they do because they're synthetic. then you have to sit back and look at your paradigm. Well, what is my paradigm telling me that that's okay? Well, what do I think about the body that it's okay to reduce this compound and then change it so that it makes it harder for the body to get rid of it and makes it a forever chemical, and it's going into our environment and destroying things and stuff like that. Your paradigm then has to be reevaluated. And I think it really took us a long time of going through that to really free ourselves of that. So yeah,
That's powerful. I know we're getting close to time to wrap up. And at the end, I'm going to ask you guys to let people know where they can find you and your beautiful medicine. But I just want to say, as a personal antidote, before you had made the Endure blend, I had torn my other knee, my good knee. And I was in a lot of pain, and I was wearing a knee brace to work. And I had to get rid of a lot of my shoes because I couldn't wear them. And having taken the Endure blend, I am back to hiking pretty much 100% normal, back to yoga pretty much 100% normal. This is about 3 months. So for me personally, it's been life-changing. I don't have to wear a knee brace to work anymore. I don't have to take an ibuprofen to make it through a shift. So I just personally want to say thank you, because it's been life-changing for me.
Yeah.
really happy to hear that they're working for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and quickly, Peter, can you, or Amy, either of you, can you talk a little about the process that you created for the cordyceps? Didn't you?
Yeah.
You did something unique and different to allow that into the tincture. Is that right? What was
Yeah.
what was different there?
So plants give different things depending on how they're extracted. And water is a way to extract things. Alcohol is a way to extract things. The cordyceps, when they're used in Tibet, they're typically added to a alcoholic drink, and then the whole bodies are eaten after they've soaked a little bit. And the alcoholic drink is slightly alcoholic, but a little bit of water. And so often you'll hear this in mushroom discussions, which is dual extraction of a mushroom. And what that is they're typically trying to do an alcohol extract and then also do a hot water extract. And what they do is they make an alcohol extract, but it doesn't get all the constituents of the plant. So they make a hot water one, and then they combine them to preserve them. Because the issue with water extraction is that there's no preservative. So it'll go bad in 3 or 4 days. So what we did was we soaked the cordyceps in alcohol to begin that alcoholic extraction. And then we added purified water and cooked it down into a 1-to-1 syrup. So what that means is there's a pound of cordyceps for 16 ounces of liquid. And so you get this very strong extract of cordyceps. And then we use that syrup, which is not shelf stable, because even though it has a small amount of alcohol, it doesn't have enough. And then we add that to the alcohol extracts of the other 5 plants, thus bringing the total alcohol content to around 40%, which is really, you don't want to go below about 40 to 45% if you want that 10-year shelf life. So in that way, we were able to extract all the medicine from the cordyceps while still maintaining a potency, a medicinal potency, and also maintaining shelf life.
Wow, that's incredible. That's
Really cool.
And then on the bottle, it gives you a dosage recommendation. How does that apply if, say, a 110-pound female takes it versus a 230-pound male, or whoever?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. The
how do you know how
question
much
of
you need? And is there too
Totally.
much?
Sure. The question of dosages and dosing is really interesting. So we've been working with plants for a little while now, and dosages, and Stephen talks a lot about this, are very personal. So other than children, which you unilaterally just form a large line across children because you don't want to take any chances, and you don't always know how children's bodies react because they're so much smaller. But for anyone that's over 80, 90 pounds as an adult, dosages are highly specific. So you could drink that whole bottle, that 1 ounce bottle, and be fine. You could have 1 drop of it and notice an effect. Sometimes it has to do with weight, sometimes not. Sometimes people's physiology, when you move certain things, are highly sensitive. no matter what size they are. So dosages, the standard dose is 1 dropper full in 1 ounce of water 3 times a day. But what I tell people is, and we've experienced this a lot with patients, both Amy and I, is that how did you feel after you took 1 dropper full? That's just the basic question. Did it help you? Well, no, I didn't really feel much of an effect. Okay, that's fine. Take 3 dropper fulls. What did you feel? Oh, I noticed that my joints are a little bit smoother, but I'm still a little tired. Okay, take 6 dropper fulls 3 times a day. What do you feel then? Oh, I feel a little too, like I'm too, I couldn't sleep that night. Okay, drop the dosage in the evening. Don't take it in the evening. Take 6 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon. How's that? Oh, that's just right. I feel my joints are loose. I feel enough energy. I feel more strength. My breathing feels better. I can sleep like a baby at night. So dosages, they're always prescribed and prescriptive, but truly, and I noticed this with myself, like the other day, Amy made a overnight infusion for our son who has a cough that sometimes comes and goes. Very light amount of herbs. And he's feeling much better on that small dilute amount. And I drank some and I was like, oh, I feel a lot better. It's a very small amount. So you really have to explore your own body, explore the effects, and be your own recorder of effects. Take a very personal relationship to what you're ingesting and see, does it make me feel better? And that's how you know you're dosaging.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, one of the things we've been doing with people that we support with herbs is like we've kind of been moving into this like as directed dosing, and trying to encourage people to kind of step into their own relationship with the medicine. I feel like that's a really important part, is to not be like, I feel like in my experience when I've given somebody something, any type of medicine, whether it's a tincture or an infusion, if they don't feel like they have a relationship to it, and like they just keep coming back, like asking me questions that I feel like they can really answer for themselves, and I want them to, because then they become in relationship with their body, their illness or ailment, whatever they're kind of trying to have plants help them with. And I feel like it kind of dissolves the fear around putting the medicine in the body, because there is a little subtle fear sometimes with people that aren't so comfortable with herbs,
Right.
but they want to work.
Right. It requires a certain mindfulness and tapping into your own intuition, right? And that's kind of what I tell my patients who I've given some of your other medicines to. It's, I say it can be a very intuitive process, right? Take it, be aware of your body, see how you feel, just like you guys are saying, and you find the right balance with it.
What did you experience, Anna? What was your preferred dosages? When did you take it? And
well, I was in a lot of pain. So, and I was like struggling in my day-to-day life. Just walking, being like ambulatory. Did I say that word right? You know what I meant? Walking. And so I was taking 3 full droppers a day. And that's when I noticed, I think I called you, Peter, and I was like, hey, I took this today and my knee doesn't hurt. Is that normal? And you were like, yeah, that's totally possible. So I took 3 full droppers a day for probably 2 months, I guess. And we've just run out, so I'm not taking it at the moment. And I feel great. My joints feel fantastic. And as somebody with janky joints, that's not a statement you'll hear me say often. So for me, it was 3 times a day. But I think now that I'm recovered, once I get my next bottle, I'll probably do 1, maybe 2, see how I feel.
And that's a great example of how you can work with it. Like one example that Stephen will give is take an ounce of motherwort tincture at night if you want to sleep. An ounce. So that's half of a shot. Medicinal plants in general, save for a few that are known to be, depressants of the CNS, which often are, cooked to make sure that they don't do that. But save those very few herbs. Most herbs you can take a lot of, like way more than you think, and you'll have great effects. And that's just that process of getting to know it and knowing the plant compounds.
Yeah, I had a friend, we have a sleep blend, and I found out, they were just taking one drop.
This happened to me with the sleep blend the other day. I was talking to a practitioner and they said, oh, it didn't really help me. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, how many did you take? And they said, well, I took one dropper at night, dropper, not a drop. And I said, oh, no. Take 6 droppers. They said, 6? I said, yeah. Take 6 droppers a night. And if you wake up, take another 6. And they sent me an email the next day and they said, yeah, that worked.
That worked.
Yeah. I asked my, this person, I was like, I mean, did it work? And they were like, well, kind of. And I told them, I was like, it's a full dropper.
Yeah.
3 full droppers.
Get the medicine in.
And then they messaged me and they were just like, wow. I slept through the whole night. And it was just hilarious. I was like, 3 drops.
And I think this gets at also too, like, this is okay for medicine to have different effects at different dosages. And like, this is a big shocker. I feel like as a practitioner, I had to grow to accept this and work with this, not work. That's okay too. What it means is that the system is asking for something else. Mm-hmm. But we know that these medicines affect physiology, period. When you take them, when you ingest them, they will change your physiology. If it's right for you, that is the process, the art of being a clinician. That's the art of being a person trying to treat your own illness. That's just the process of life.
Right.
Like you just, that's it. So these plants, they do something. Mm-hmm. Do they do something for you? That's a greater story. And maybe it's not enough. Maybe it's not the extraction. Maybe it needs to be water. Maybe it needs to be alcohol. Maybe you need to just brew a hot overnight infusion. Maybe you have to change some lifestyle things and take them. And then boom, oh man, there was your change. So that, again, that gets back to the earlier conversation about reductionism, mm-hmm. around what are we actually living in, this very complex web. And it kind of breaks these sort of preconceptions we have when we work with medicines that don't fit into a reductionist model. It's like, well, you have to explore them. And that's just part of the process.
And that's completely different from the, you take this much, this many times a day, do not exceed this amount, these hard rules of pharmaceutical drugs that we've, been exposed to.
Yes,
in our lives. So it makes us feel like if you're telling me that, it might be 1 drop or it might be 6 droppers, how can this work? How can this be real medicine? But totally. You have to just become okay with this different process, because it is a totally different process, but no less effective. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
And I think this gets back to body intelligence and also synthesized medicines, drugs. They carry with them, typically, depends on the medicine, extremely onerous side effects. Mm-hmm. And that's really that's why dosaging is so important, which, by the way, is a whole nother complicated thing about dose-dependent response, which is something that is not talked about. But sometimes you don't even need a large dose of a synthetic to have extreme response. And we're seeing this in the environment now. You can have very small amounts of Xanax and completely change fish sex expression, like a tiny trillionths of a part. So that is in a real, you have to follow those prescriptions in general, because when they're synthesized like that, the effects are deleterious. Whereas most plants, there are some where you get maybe nausea when you have too much, or you sweat too much, or you have a stomach ache, but your kidney, you don't have organ failure, like there's a huge gap there. And I think it's spot on, Ashley, is that's a holdover. And how do you work with that?
Right. It's a process. Wow, you guys, this has been an incredible conversation. My head is spinning. I'm so excited. This is definitely something I think we have to have a round 2 and go deeper into some of these topics for sure.
I agree.
But yeah, I want to thank you both so much for this incredible medicine, this blend, and for taking the time to talk with us today.
And where can people find you guys if people want to try your medicine?
Well, you can find us through our website. It's yindew.com.
YINDEW.com.
Yes. And we have an Instagram. It's Yindew_herbal medicine. So we're active on there, but the best place would be our website.
Excellent.
Great. And, we work with practitioners and we work with the general public. So, if you are a practitioner wanting medicine, for us to make medicine, make you custom blends, we do that. We make custom syrups, salves. We're pretty crafty, so we've made all different types of medicine. And if you're someone from the general public, then we also make blends and medicines and consult too. So that's our full scope of our practice.
And Peter, if somebody wanted to come to you for acupuncture services, should they reach out on Yin Dew, or is there another?
Yeah, they can reach out on Yin Dew. That's just fine. You just send an email through there, and then that works just perfect.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciated talking about everything.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys. And we will be back with another episode soon.
In the new year.